Don't go into the woods. This world is a strange one. Not much would be more terrifying than to end up in the middle of the woods at night. It's not the thought of how you got there or how you'll get out. What's most terrifying are the evils that lurk just beyond the trees around you. Forests are home to dark mysteries and ravenous creatures that know you're there before you ever hear them coming. There's a reason mankind moved away from the woods, settling into cities and urban rot. Because out there, where nature rules, it is unsafe for man. You just might be the next mysterious disappearance, or even the next unexplained animal killing. Watch your back. Okay, so to fully understand this story, you're going to need a bit of background. First of all, this isn't actually my story, it's my father's. He told this to me in his late age, only a few months before he passed. He couldn't stress enough how much he wanted me to know that there are some things out there that just can't be explained. And with him recently passing away, I couldn't help but think about this story. I feel like he would want me to share it with everyone if he was still around, so I'm going to tell this to you just as it was told to me, from his perspective. This was sometime in the 60s. I don't know the exact year, but it was long before it was common for every teenager to be carrying around a $500 camera phone. It was nearing the beginning of the summer, and due to recent financial problems, the first summer in my new house since the recent move. The house we lived in was a good half-mile from our nearest neighbor. There were woods all around us. The first time anything weird happened was on a night I was tossing and turning in bed. I was completely incapable of falling asleep in the summertime heat. My parents were long since awake, and my brother, whom was in the bed next to mine, was also fast asleep. And that's when I started hearing some sort of screaming. There was no way it was human, but at the same time, it was like nothing I had ever heard from any animal before. If I had to describe it, it would be like a monkey's screech, but as if attempted by some type of large dog, if that makes any sense. It was undoubtedly feral, nothing some druggie in the woods could have produced. At first, it was so distant, I didn't know what to think. I was the only person in my house who'd heard it, and despite feeling slightly uneasy in this situation, I reasoned that I didn't know too much about all the different animal cries, and that I shouldn't let my imagination of what that thing could be get to me. Not to mention the comfort that came with being in my cozy little home with my family nearby. Nonetheless, I eventually faded out of consciousness due to my exhaustion and finally fell asleep. The next day, I completely forgot about it and went about my day as usual. However, once every few nights, this would happen in the early hours of the morning. I'm not sure if it happened every night. It could have just happened when I was asleep, for all I knew. Regardless, I was still the only one who's heard it. I thought about waking up my family during the shrieking outside, but the thought of how bad I would be punished for waking my parents up in the middle of the night was too risky. I knew they would punish me, and chances are they would just try and tell me it's a fox or something like that, which at this point, it could have been, for all I knew. It all changed one night when, as expected, I heard the shrieking. This time, however, it dawned on me that I hadn't seen my cat. His name was Nappy. I hadn't seen him all day. He usually doesn't stray too far from the house, and I was worried for him because there are things out there, a little less paranormal, that will still attack him. I stealthily rolled out of bed and tiptoed out of the room. I glanced at Nappy's bed. It was empty. I walked down the stairs, far enough away at this point so they won't hear me. I searched everywhere, but to no avail. I did not find my beloved cat. It suddenly dawned on me that the shrieking was much louder than the usual distant howl. I started panicking, and then I got really angry at the thought of someone or something hurting my best friend. I put on my boots and grabbed my father's rifle. We occasionally go hunting, so I have a decent understanding of how to use it, and I was preparing for the worst. I creak open the back door and step out, leaving the door slightly ajar. I begin my search around the property, staying within the perimeter my cat usually does. All the while, I'm whispering his name, becoming more and more frantic each minute. I can hear the thing much more clearly from the outdoors, and I quickly began to question my decision. That changed when I finally found my cat. It was scared shitless and tail bushier than ever, curled up in a ball behind a pile of wood. He sees me, and he bolts away, hissing all the while. Thankfully, he runs right back into the house. He's never hissed at me before, so that was kind of weird, but I figure it's just because he's scared of whatever the hell is out there screeching. Then I realize I'm still out here with this thing and begin to speed walk towards the door as I get increasingly paranoid. Then it happens. I hear a scream from the woods, although this time it's different. This one was unmistakably human and closer than whatever it was making the shrieking noise. I debate for a minute what to do before deciding that somebody's life could be in danger, and I quickly march towards the edge of the forest to, at the very least, try to get an idea of just what the hell is going on in those woods. I load the rifle, fearing the worst. The woods are far too thick to see anything from the edge, but I can hear what I can now tell is a female, panicking in the woods, sounding like she's trying to get away from something, accompanied by an all too familiar shriek, although this time it seems more short in a bursting pattern, like it's panting. This is the moment where I had to make a choice. I could either turn around now and try to get help, or I could face down the unknown, head on, with a rifle. I knew I would regret it forever if I didn't take this upon myself to see what was going on in those woods. Quite on the contrary, I now know that what I did next was the worst mistake I had ever made in my life. I ran into the woods at top speed, dodging trees in the direction of the commotion. It was a completely pitch-black night, no moon, and the treetops completely covered the forest from any starlight. I wasn't even looking where I was going. I felt so powerful and brave. I was just running as fast as I could until, crack, I ran headfirst into something. Panicking, I reached for the rifle before even looking up, then, wait! What I ran into was what I assumed to be a screaming girl. She looked to be about my age. At the time, it was 15. She had curly brown hair and huge green eyes. Obviously, she was hyperventilating, and I could see the fear in her eyes. I asked her why she was screaming and where she had come from. I had so many questions, but before I could even finish asking, she grabbed my arm and said in a panicking voice, "We need to go now." I was so confused, but there was no time, so I stopped resisting and let her lead me as we sprinted in the opposite direction of my house. I could hear something breathing heavy behind us, and the sound of twigs snapping, but I didn't dare turn around. My legs felt like jello, and I felt like they were going to melt underneath me, and my lungs were on fire. Regrettably, I wasn't the one to be so unfortunate to trip. I'm assuming her foot got stuck on a root or something, but I was just focused on escaping, because one moment she was in front of me, and the next moment I had to jump over her without any regard for her. Then I snapped out of it and turned around, raising the rifle. What I saw next was the most horrifying thing I had ever seen in my entire life. No more than 5 or 6 meters from me did this creature stand. What I noticed first was its eyes. They were bright yellow. This thing was very thin, yet clearly large. Up until now, it was on all fours, crouched in a sprinter's position. Then it stood up, and even though it was still hunched over, it had to have been at least 7 or 8 feet tall. It was completely hairless, and so pale, it was almost pink. That's when it let out the oh-so-familiar screech. I knew that that was what I had been hearing throughout the past couple of weeks. I was completely frozen with fear, and at this point, the girl had just freed herself and began crawling away. It grabbed her ankle and picked her up effortlessly. I snapped out of it and managed to pull the trigger. A loud explosion rang through my ears before I realized the bullet had missed. It then focused on me as I stood there in utter disbelief. I pulled back the bolt again and aimed. It dropped the girl and started walking towards me. I aimed the barrel right at the abomination's face and pulled the trigger for the second time. This time, it connected. It then proceeded to let out the most deafening and ear-splitting screech I've ever heard. The creature turned and blindly ran into a tree, shaking the whole thing and leaving a giant mark at the base. It turned again and sprinted at an unbelievable speed into the dense forest. My whole body was shaking so much I could hardly breathe. I turned around to face the girl, but she was already back to running. I tried to call out, "Wait!" but to no avail. I don't blame her for running. It wouldn't be very wise to stay out there anyway, so I didn't waste a moment and began my long sprint home. When I say sprint, I mean it. I didn't dare slow down, and I felt like I was being watched the whole time. When I got home, it was only 3:30 in the morning. I hung the rifle back up and then just laid in bed. There was no way I was getting any sleep that night. I was out of it for the next couple of days from shock. I never did find out what happened to that girl, as we moved halfway across the country at the first job opportunity my father received. I never told anybody in my family, and I never heard the shrieking for the rest of the time I was in that house. I really do wonder whatever happened to that girl, or if she even made it out of those woods at all. And that's the end of my father's story. After listening to other people's encounters, I think it sounded like my father may have encountered a wendigo or rake. I'm not sure. Unfortunately, I never got the chance to show my father a picture of one and ask him. Just be careful out there. If there's one thing he would have wanted me to do, it would be to warn people with this story and let them know that there are things out there and there are truly freaks of nature. Whether they be just undiscovered animals or something straight out of hell, just know that they are real.